Haitian Revolution took place in Saint-Dominique. Before the revolution began, it was one of the wealthiest overseas colonies because of the production of sugar, coffee, indigo, and cotton. It was produced by enslaved labor force. There were 5 different social groups in Saint-Dominique. The first group were the whites, who owned plantations and slaves, and did not have any representation in France. France also imposed steep tariffs and forbid them to trade with any other nation, which the whites didn't agree with. They also refused to apply a law named the Declaration of the Rights of Men that entitled all men born of free parents to be considered full citizens in the colonies. This law was passed by the French National Assembly in 1791. The second social group were the Petit Blancs, who were artisans, shopkeepers, and teachers. Some of them owned slaves. The Petit Blancs, like the whites, wanted independence, but remained committed to slavery. The third social group were Free Blacks, who were often wealthier than Petit Blancs. In 1789, there were about 30,000 free blacks. Half of them were mulatto. The fourth social group were slaves. The slaves weren't willing to submit to their slave status, and there were about 50,000 slaves in Saint-Dominique. The last social group were the runaway slaves, who were also called Maroons. They lived off subsistence farming. They had retreated deep into the mountains of Saint-Dominique. The egalitarian ideology of the French Revolution inspired many of these people to rethink their position. Many whites began to support an independence movement, which began when France imposed steep tariffs on items imported. Fights between whites and free blacks broke out in the capital, Port-au-Prince. These fights began because of the whites not wanting to guarantee free black citizenship. Slave rebellions, which began before 1791, involved the poisoning of their masters. In June 1791, slaves in the cul-de-sac plains began to abandon their plantations. They frequently met up in the woods and plotted their revolution. The white planters attempted to break up their meetings, but the slaves resisted. Still, the planters stopped them and increased surveillance and patrolling around the plantations. Toussaint Louverture led the slaves against the white planters on August 21, 1791. He was an Enlightenment leader that risked everything to join the army and fight against France and Britain. By 1792, they controlled a third of the island. The same year, in May, the Europeans began fighting for control of Saint-Dominique. A month later, the blacks and mulattoes of South Saint-Dominique became allies with the British and began an open rebellion. On February 1793, rebel leaders joined with Spanish forces to fight against the French. Louverture betrayed his Spanish allies and instead offered his services to the French under General Laville. In 1795, France and Spain signed the Treaty of Basel, which ceded Saint-Dominique to France and abolished slavery. By early 1795, Louverture controlled much of the north and west provinces, and was made commander-in-chief. He created a centralized and authoritarian state based on forced labor and had provincial governors that reported directly to him. Napoleon Bonaparte sent French troops in Saint-Dominique to capture Louverture. He wanted to restore French rule and slavery. Louverture died in a French prison on April 7, 1803. Since the death of Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and Henri Christophe, Louverture's lieutenants, led troops to the Battle of Versailles on November 8, 1803, where they defeated French forces. General Rochambeau surrendered to them and fled Saint-Dominique. Dessalines declared independence on 1804. Saint-Dominique was renamed to Haiti. The remaining French residents were slaughtered. On October 8, 1804, Dessalines was crowned Emperor Jacques I of Haiti. Haiti became the first black republic in the world and the second nation in the Western Hemisphere to gain independence from European power. The Haitian Revolution compared to the American Revolution were very similar. Like the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution gained independence from Europe. One of the causes for both was because of not being represented. They both wanted to abolish slavery, which Haiti was successful in, but the U.S. did not abolish because of fear of problems arising. They were both inspired by the French Revolution in some way.